Today we're making a quick and easy quilt that shows off the fabrics beautifully. You're going to love how easy this is because all we're going to be doing is creating two very simple quilt blocks, and I think you're going to love the end result. Now the fabric I'll be using today was sent to us by Cotton Cuts, and I have to say that we had a bit of trouble creating a pattern for these fabrics because of the colours and the directional print. We design our quilts using EQ8 software, and that allows us to import swatches of the fabric so we can see just how the quilt is going to look, but we just couldn't get anything to work. We knew we needed a contrasting fabric, but just adding white didn't cut it. It was only when we added some blue fabric that everything seemed to pop. Cotton Cuts sends us fabric packs quarterly, and they're always a surprise because we never know what is going to be in the pack. Now Cotton Cuts is a membership service that lets you choose how often you want to receive a pack of fabric. Plus, you can make choices so that you get the type of fabric, the patterns and the colourways that you like. Now this particular pack includes a pencil with a cute little quote which reads, "Crafting comfort piece by piece," some matching Aurifil thread, some helpful cards with block of the month, and 3 yards of beautiful fabrics. The range is Coyote Hill by Katie O'Shea for Art Gallery Fabrics. I'll put a link in the description field below to Cotton Cuts for those of you who are interested in trying out their subscription service. So I've already gone ahead and cut some squares of fabric for the centerpieces of my blocks, and I have 10 of each of these. And I've also cut some pieces of blue fabric and some pieces of the owl fabric. I have 2 different sizes for these pieces, some long and some short, and just so you know, all of the measurements and the written instructions for this project will be on the website, so just check the description field below for the link. So what I'm going to do is take a square of each fabric, and I'm going to take the shorter sashing pieces and place them on the sides of the squares. This one will have the blue pieces, and this one will have the orange pieces. And just keep in mind where these are placed if you are using a directional print, like I am. Now I'm going to sew these pieces on with a 1/4 inch seam, and I'll repeat this process for all of the squares. Okay, so I have them all sewn, and now we're going to take the longer sashing pieces and sew them onto the top and the bottom of the blocks, and I'll repeat that with all of the blocks that I have here. So all the blocks are complete, and I have 10 of each, and I'm just going to put them aside for the moment and go on to the next step. So now I'm going to cut a strip of white fabric measuring 12.5 by the width of the fabric, and I'm using this Creative Grids ruler to do this. It's huge, which means I don't have to measure using my mat. Now I did trim off the salvages from one end. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to subcut this strip into 2-inch pieces. So I'll line up my ruler on the 2-inch mark and cut. And I'll repeat that all the way down the strip. Now I've ended up with 21 pieces, but we only need 20 for this quilt. Now I'm going to take those pieces and I'm going to sew them onto the sides of each block. And if you are using a directional print like I am, just make sure that your sashing is sewn to the correct side of the block. So I have them sewn, and now we're going to add some sashing and a cornerstone to the top of each block, and you can do this in one of 2 ways. You can go with the traditional method by cutting individual sashing pieces and sewing them together to attach to the top of the block. We will have the cutting instructions on the website if you want to do this method. Or you can do what I'm going to do and cut strips of fabric and sew them together, which I find to be a lot faster than the traditional method. So I'm going to cut a piece of the white fabric at 12.5 inches by the width of fabric and a piece of the blue fabric at 2 inches by the width of the fabric. And I also cut another smaller piece of the white and blue. So what I'm going to do with these strips is sew the white strips to the blue strips with a 1/4 inch seam, and this is what they look like once they're sewn together. And now I'm going to subcut these into 2-inch pieces, so I'll line up my ruler along the 2-inch mark and cut, and I'll repeat that all the way along the strip. So out of the first strip set, I got 21 pieces, but I need 9 more, so I'm going to be cutting those from the second strip set. So now we need to add these pieces to the blocks, and I'll be adding them to the top of all the blocks like so. So I have them all sewn on, and as you can see, we have some leftover sashing pieces, and I'll show you what to do with those next. What I'm going to do now is lay out the blocks so we can see where we're at, and then I'm going to place the remaining sashing pieces along the bottom and the side of the quilt. And you'll notice that we have a space here, so we need to cut one more piece of blue at 2 inches by 2 inches, and I've already gone ahead and done that. Now I'm going to start by sewing on the bottom sashing pieces to each of these blocks in the bottom row. Okay, so they're sewn on, and now I'm going to sew on this little square of blue fabric, and once it's sewn on I will take the sashing piece and sew it to the side of this block. And I'll also sew the remaining sashing pieces to the sides of all the blocks on this side of the quilt. So now that our blocks are all complete, we can start sewing them together into rows. I usually do this in lots of 2 at a time and then sew them together to form a row. And now that the rows are sewn, I just need to sew them all together to form the quilt top. So the quilt top is almost done, and now we're ready to add our borders. So I'm going to sew the long borders on first, and at this point your quilt should measure 69 inches in height, so you'll need to join some strips together to get the length you need. Now once they're sewn on, I will add the top and the bottom borders. And there you have it, our quilt top is complete. So thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this tutorial, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more helpful quilting and sewing tutorials.